All right, hi guys, and welcome back. This is the second part of the 3 or so videos that I'm going to try to make. That might end up being four. I'm going to try to keep these around 8 minutes or so. So what we're going to talk about this time is the response to Luther by people that were starting to get upset about this, namely Catholics, okay, and very higher up Catholics. And we'll talk about some of the differences between the different reformers, okay, that were coming along. And also, I will tell you a little bit about a king that's also in your text, and we'll talk about how he posed a challenge to the Pope as well and the Catholic Church. Okay, so one thing, just to go back a little bit, make sure on page 55, which is right before this, that you read over the part where it says the 95 Theses, and this was Martin Luther's ideas. Hey, this was basically his protest, and he nailed it on the wall of the church. And one morning, and people came out and started reading it, and this was his big way of protesting, okay, the church. And he was really against the selling of indulgences. So you want to make sure you read about that. An indulgent, know what an indulgence is, okay? And it's a little bit heavy stuff, but if you bought one of these indulgences, you basically had a ticket to heaven. So the church was selling you, or the Catholic Church was selling people, sometimes for a lot of money, these indulgences. And so the church made so much money because people were really worried about their salvation or what was going to happen after, in the next world when you pass away. So they were really worried about this, and people have always been worried about this. This is entirely normal. But the church was profiting, and people were sometimes spending so much money on an indulgence, like their whole savings and everything, and the church was just getting more and more corrupt and more rich. All right, and that's what he was protesting. Now you want to know a little bit also about Pope Leo X and what he did and what he tried to do to Luther. And basically you need to know what excommunication is, okay? And that's what he did to Luther. Luther didn't care that much. He did, but he was in too deep at that point, and he basically burned the decree. Know what excommunication is, know what who Pope Leo X was, and what he tried to do to Luther, okay? And he did excommunicate him. What is excommunication? Yeah, look it up. Let's look it over, okay? The other guy was the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V. He's a devout Catholic. Being a devout Catholic, you're going to have a problem with Martin Luther, okay? Why would he have a problem? Well, that's a fair question that I could ask you on the test, is why did Charles V, a devout Catholic, have a problem, or why was he opposed to Luther's teaching? All right, so read over that. This little town of Worms, which is near Munich. I've actually been there, and they spelled worms, but it's pronounced Worms. I know that because it says it here, for one thing, and because I teach German. But I actually went to that town, and I also went to Martin Luther's personal library, which is super interesting. And I would put that on your wish list if you want, or not. But I thought it was fun because I studied history. Main thing about Martin Luther, he's bound by the scriptures. That's his big thing, okay? I mean, that's really simplifying it, but he basically is saying, hey, you know what? What it says in the Bible matters, not what your priest is telling you. Many times people were illiterate, especially illiterate in Latin. Okay, they may have spoken German, and of course in Germany they all spoke German, but they couldn't read Latin, and the priests were speaking Latin in church, and so they didn't understand what was in the Bible. But when Luther translated the Bible into German, all of a sudden they knew, okay, the priests are not doing what's in the Bible. Okay, so Luther said basically follow the Bible. And then basically Germany goes into this religious war begins between Catholics and Protestants. So yeah, review that. And here it comes on this page, and that would be page 57 in your book. You get a breakdown of how Christianity is sort of dividing, or how the big division of it, okay? And you have the early Christian church. You have Eastern Orthodoxy. That's more like over in Eastern Europe, sort of Russia and some of the Eastern Bloc countries today have more of an Orthodox religions, okay? You have Roman Catholicism is what we know as the Pope and so on, and then then it breaks away and this is the early, you can see early in 1500 there was this split, the split of Orthodoxy and Catholicism, and then in the 16th century, around 1520, 1530, you have this Protestantism, okay? You have the Lutheranism, you have Anglicans, and you have Calvinists, okay? So know the difference between these three, okay? And Lutheranism, Calvinism, and here, study this box here. This is really good. And I mean, Calvinism, the part about predetermination or predestination, this idea that God has already decided what's going to happen to you. You have no, there's nothing you can really do. If you're going to be one of those saved people, that's because he decided that. Again, I'm just telling you what it is. These things are. I'm not telling you what to believe. These are different Christian beliefs. Okay, Lutheranism, salvation by faith. And Anglicanism, also salvation by faith. Okay, Bible is the sole source of revealed truth. You can review this table, all right, which is also on page 57. Make sure you go over that. Okay, now I'm going to skip over the piece of Augsburg because there's just too much here, but Henry VIII wants a son. Okay, definitely read this about Henry VIII. It's super fascinating. He basically had a first wife who just only was able to give him a daughter, and that frustrated him, and so he wanted a divorce. And divorce was not permitted by the Catholic Church. So in England, you have a conflict between the King of England wanting a divorce and then with the Catholic Church, because it was not allowed at that time. And it was like a huge sin. So you can see how there are problems that are brewing all over Europe because of this really strict rules in the Catholic Church. But read about him. It's super interesting. He had his first wife, then he had a second wife, and she gave him another daughter. And then I believe finally the third wife gave him a son. So he was happy, but a couple weeks later, she died, and he could only get one son from her, and then he married 3 more times, and none of these. However, he didn't get any children from any of those 3. This daughter, Elizabeth, becomes very important. We'll talk about her later, okay? The joke about this is that we often hear is every king wanted basically an heir, which was the son, and a spare, which would be a second son. So every king wants an heir and a spare in case one of them dies. Then at least one son is going to make it. But Henry was no other way to say it, he was pretty much a failure when it came to producing sons. He was only able to get one son. And instead, he just killed he killed his wife, and this is horrible. He's a horrible guy. Okay, and definitely read about Elizabeth I and her issues that she had with Mary, Queen of Scots, who was a Catholic. This story is one of the most interesting stories, and there's a movie that you can probably find somewhere on Netflix or on Prime or somewhere. That's just Elizabeth, okay? And I actually went to Scotland 2 years ago and did a whole guided tour of Scotland and talked to this guide a lot who's really knowledgeable about Scottish history and about Mary, Queen of Scots. And I was really curious about it, and I'd just seen the movie, and he said the main problem with the movie was Elizabeth and Mary, Queen of Scots. They actually never met face to face. They never saw each other, and that was a big, huge error in that movie, or at least according to that guide. So, but read that over. That's really, really interesting. Okay, I'm going to move on. Here's a section about John Calvin. The main thing about him, again, is that he had this idea of predestination, and he led the Reformation in Switzerland. That's where I'm from. Some of my relatives are Calvinists. They believe in what he preached, okay? And then there are these guys called the Huguenots, or Huguenots. And there was hatred between the Catholics and the Huguenots. And there's, many people died here. There are huge massacres. Basically, Catholics were going around trying to kill Protestants, and Protestants were going around trying to kill Catholics, and so many people died in this basic religious war that was going on in the 1500s. Okay. All right, you don't need to know about the Anabaptists. I would say the Jesuits definitely know who they were, okay, and then read about the Council of Trent. Know what happened there, what they decided there. There are some really important things. Just this one here, where any Christian who substituted his or her own interpretation was a heretic. Okay, so a heretic is basically a non-believer, someone who needs to be thrown out of the church or eliminated, and many times heretics were just hung or burned. Okay, it was bad stuff if you're a heretic. So you could not have your own interpretation of the Bible. That's not a good cause. So the Council of Trent was important. It was starting to take on these issues, okay, of what the problems that were coming about. It was meant to calm things down a bit, okay? And there were two popes that kind of led it and kind of reform things and help bring our country, or bring the whole region, to more peace. Read this part over for sure, the religious and social effects of the Reformation and the political effects of the Reformation. Read over these primary and secondary sources. I could very well take, like this one about Martin Luther, and throw it on the test, ask you a question about it, or this one about Hans Broshammer, okay, seven-headed Martin Luther. I might throw a primary source or a secondary source on the test, or even, and let you try to, here's the seven-headed guy, okay? So, have you answer a question about that. All right, next video, I'll get into the Muslim world. All right, thanks, guys, and see you next time.